They weren't hunting her. They were hunting what she chose to protect. The sky above VX-331 burned like a wound that refused to close. Thick clouds of metallic dust hung in the atmosphere, ignited by orbital bombardment until the horizon glowed, a deep, suffocating red. It painted everything in shades of bloodstone, smoke, and the lone figure standing at the center of it all. Mara Voss didn't move. Her rifle hung useless in her grip. Its energy core long dead. Its weight now, nothing more than a reminder of what she used to be. Her armor was cracked along the ribs, scorched at the shoulder, and sticky with drying blood. Some of it belonged to her. Most of it didn't. Behind her, pressed low against the jagged rocks, 3 small shapes trembled. Cubs. Not small by human standards, but small for what they would become. Their bodies were built like coiled muscle wrapped in dense fur, their eyes wide and glowing faintly in the red haze. Their teeth too large for their young, jaws peeked out as they let out soft, uncertain sounds. Mara didn't turn to look at them, because if she did, if she saw the fear in their eyes, she might break. "Stay behind me," she whispered. They didn't understand the words. They couldn't. But something in her voice, low, steady, unyielding, reached them anyway. The trembling lessened. One of them edged closer to her leg, pressing its side against her as if she was something solid, something safe. Mara swallowed hard. Funny. A year ago, she would have called in an airstrike without hesitation. Now she stood between the strike and its target. The distant rumble of approaching engines vibrated through the ground. Human soldiers, methodical, relentless, doing exactly what they had been trained to do. Exactly what she had been trained to do. Her jaw tightened. "We don't change," she thought bitterly. "We just pretend we do. Until it matters." The first time Mara Voss killed on command, she told herself it was necessary. The 100th time, she told herself it was routine. The last time, she didn't tell herself anything at all. That had been on a colony world whose name she tried very hard not to remember. Intelligence had flagged it as compromised, possible hostile infiltration, non-human contamination. Orders came down fast, clean, unquestioned. Neutralize. She remembered the silence most clearly, not the screams, not the chaos. The silence after. Buildings still standing, equipment intact, no resistance, just bodies. Too many bodies, some of them small. Mara had stood in the center of it, helmet off, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Her commanding officer had called it a success. She called it the moment something inside her died. After that, they moved her off the front lines, said her skill set would be better utilized elsewhere. Less exposure, less pressure. Xe. NobilogY. Observation. Documentation. A quieter kind of war. That's how she ended up on VX-331 Grindelwald. The soldiers called it, laughing in that hollow way soldiers laugh when they're trying not to think too hard about where they are. Everything on the planet hunted or was hunted. The ecosystems were brutal, efficient, and merciless. Entire species rose and fell in cycles measured in weeks. It should have been simple. Find the dominant predators, study them, contain, or eliminate them if necessary. But the first time Mara saw them, something didn't fit. It happened at dusk. The kind of dusk where the sky turned a dull violet, and the temperature dropped just enough to make the air feel sharp in your lungs. She had been alone, crouched behind a ridge, scanning the valley below. That's when she felt it. Not a sound. Not a movement, a presence. She turned slowly. 2 eyes stared back at her from the shadows. Large, reflective, unblinking. Every instinct. She had screamed at her, to reach for her weapon, to fire, to survive. She didn't. The creature didn't either. They just looked at each other. Mara exhaled slowly. "Go on," she murmured under her breath. "Figure out what I am." The predator tilted its head slightly. Curious. Not aggressive, not afraid. Curious. Stepped forward. Just enough for the fading light to catch the edges of its 4 massive shoulders. Bone-like plating along its skull. Muscles that moved like coiled cables under thick fur. And then, after a long moment, that stretched into something almost surreal. It turned and disappeared into the dark. Mara stayed there, long after it was gone. "Yeah," she whispered to no one. "You're not what they think you are." Over the next several weeks, she watched them. Not through a scope, not as targets, but as beings. They hunted, yes, violently, efficiently, but never wastefully, never cruelly. They didn't kill for Dominance displays or territorial pride, the way some human units did. They killed to survive, and they cared for their own. She saw it clearly the day she first spotted the den. A large female later identified in her logs as Reth-Ka, carrying the carcass of a mid-sized herbivore. She dropped it gently near the entrance of a rocky hollow, then lowered her massive frame and let out a series of low, rumbling sounds from inside. The cubs emerged, small, unsteady, vocal. They rushed her, climbing over her, biting playfully at her armored face. Reth didn't react with irritation. She nudged them closer to the food, guiding them, watching them eat before she took a single bite herself. Mara felt her throat tighten. They're not monsters, she realized. They're families. That was the moment everything changed. Command didn't see it that way. They're apex predators, Commander Holly said over the comm, his tone flat, dismissive. Unstable variables in a resource-rich zone. They're organized, Mara argued, pacing inside the outpost. They communicate. They show protective behavior. This isn't random aggression, it's structured, intelligent. Hallie didn't pause. Then they're a bigger threat than we thought. Mara stopped walking. You're going to wipe them out. We're going to secure the planet by killing everything on it that doesn't fit your model. A brief silence. Then, colder than before. That's above your clearance level, Voss. The transmission ended. The bombardment began 12 hours later. Fire fell from the sky in streaks of blinding white, turning the land into a graveyard of shattered stone and burning air. The ground shook with each impact. Shockwaves rolled across the terrain, flattening anything that couldn't outrun them. Mara didn't hesitate. She ran not toward safety, toward the dens, toward them. By the time she reached the valley, it was already too late for many. Bodies lay scattered, some human, most not. The air smelled like ash and something heavier. Something final. She found Reth near the den entrance, wounded. A deep gash ran along her flank, dark blood soaking into the ground beneath her. She stood anyway, legs trembling but locked in place, her body positioned between the entrance and the advancing human units in the distance. The cubs were behind, her crying. Mara slowed as she approached. Reth saw her immediately, her head lowered slightly, a low growl building in her chest. Not an attack, a warning. Mara raised her hand slowly and let her rifle drop to the ground. I'm not here to hurt you, she said softly. The growl didn't stop, but it didn't escalate either. They stood there, staring at each other through smoke and fire, and the wreckage of two worlds colliding. Mara took one careful step forward, then another. Behind Reth, one of the cubs peeked out, its eyes wide, confused, searching. Something inside Mara broke and reformed into something stronger. She turned away from them and faced the humans. Stand down, she shouted into her comm, her voice cutting through the static. There are non-hostile life forms here. Repeat, stand down! Their response came instantly. You are interfering with an active operation? Voss, Hale's voice snapped back. Step aside. I won't. Then you're compromised. The first shot cracked through the air a second later. It hit the ground near her feet. A warning. Mara let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Of course it is, she muttered. Of course, this is how it ends. She picked up her rifle again, not to fire, but to hold. A reflex more than a strategy. Behind her, the cubs pressed closer together. Reth shifted, trying to stand taller despite the blood loss. Mara squared her shoulders. Last chance. Voss, Holly said. Moved. Mara's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. No. Gunfire erupted. Time fractured. Mara moved on instinct. Years of training, snapping back into place. She ducked, rolled, closed the distance. Even without power, the rifle became a blunt weapon in her hands. She struck fast, precise, disarming one soldier, knocking another to the ground. But there were too many. There were always too many. A shot tore through her shoulder. The impact spun her halfway around, sending her crashing to one knee. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but she forced herself back up. Not yet, she thought. Not yet. Another shot grazed her side, burning hot as it passed through fabric and skin. Her breathing hitched, vision blurring at the edges. Still, she stood, because behind her they were still alive. That was all that mattered. She lunged again, buying seconds. Just seconds. A lifetime. In the right context. Then the final shot came. Cleaner than the others. Quieter. It hit her center mass, punching through armor and bone with brutal efficiency. Mara staggered. The world tilted. Sound faded into a distant hum. She dropped to her knees. For a moment, everything felt calm. She turned her head slowly. The cubs were still there. Alive, safe. Kareth stood behind them. Her eyes locked on Mara, something unreadable in their depths. Mara exhaled, a soft breath that carried more relief than pain. Good, she whispered. And then she fell. Silence followed, not the empty silence of destruction. Something heavier. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised, but their movements uncertain. Kareth stepped forward, slowly, carefully, not as a predator, as something else. She approached Mara's body and lowered her massive head. For a long moment, she simply stood there, breathing, watching, remembering. Then she let out a low, resonant sound. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a threat. It was grief. The cubs joined her, pressing against Mara's still form, nudging her as if expecting her to move again. The humans didn't understand what they were seeing, but they felt it one by one. A few of them lowered their weapons, not out of orders, out of something they couldn't quite name. Days later, deep within the predator territory, something new began. Bones were gathered, not as trophies, not as spoils, but as something sacred. They carved them carefully, shaping edges, refining balance. Not crude, not primitive, intentional blades. And into each one they etched markings, not human letters, not any language, spoken aloud, but meaning, memory, a name. Mara Voss, the human who stood between death and something defenseless, and chose to become the shield instead of the sword. And from that day forward, predator that carried a blade, carried her with them. The blade wasn't forged for war. It was forged for remembrance. Renner almost didn't see it. That was the strange part. Not the ruins. Not the bones scattered across the valley. Not even the silence thick, unnatural, pressing against his ears like the planet itself was holding its breath. No, it was the blade half buried beneath ash-colored dust, lying at an angle that caught just enough of the pale moonlight to glint softly, deliberately, like it wanted to be found. Eli paused mid-step. Yeah, he muttered under his breath, adjusting the scanner on his wrist. That's not suspicious at all. His voice sounded too loud out here. Everything did. VX-331 wasn't supposed to be quiet. Every report described it as violently alive, predators, shifting ecosystems, constant motion. But this region, dead. Or, at least, pretending to be. Eli crouched slowly, brushing the dust away from the object. His gloved fingers hesitated just before touching it. Don't be stupid, he whispered to himself. It's just salvage. He picked it up. The first thing he noticed was the weight. Not heavy, but balanced. Perfectly, like it had been crafted with intention, not crude necessity. The blade itself wasn't metal, not entirely. It looked organic, carved from bone but polished to a smooth, almost glass-like finish. The edge caught the moonlight again. Sharp. Too sharp for something made out here. Okay, Eli frowned. That's new. Then he saw the markings, etched along the side, running from hilt to tip, were symbols. Not random scratches, not decorative patterns. Language. His scanner buzzed faintly as it tried to interpret. Eli held the blade closer, angling it toward the dim light. Come on, give me something. The translation flickered. Glitched. Restarted. Then slowly stabilized. Eli's brow furrowed. No way. He read it again, out loud this time, quieter than before. Mara Voss. The name hung in the air. Human. Definitely human. Eli's grip tightened slightly. Why would him? He trailed off, glancing around the empty valley. Why would something out here have a human name carved into it? No answer came. Of course not. Just that same oppressive silence. Eli exhaled and clipped the blade to his pack. All right, he said, forcing a bit of confidence into his tone. Congratulations, Eli. You just found something expansive. He didn't say valuable. He said expensive. Because valuable things usually came with stories, and stories got people killed. The ruins stretched further than he expected. Massive, stone-like structures, half-collapsed, jagged edges worn down by time and weather. They didn't look human. Too organic in shape. Too grown instead of built. Eli moved carefully between them, boots crunching lightly against debris. His scanner flickered again. Energy signatures. Old. Faint. But not dead. Of course they're not dead, he muttered. Nothing on this planet ever really dies. He stopped at what looked like a central chamber rift. You could call it that. The walls curved inward, forming a hollow space filled with more bones, more carvings, more blades. Eli froze. There were dozens of them, no dash hundreds, all embedded into the ground, angled outward, like markers' graves. Okay. Eli's voice dropped. That's definitely not normal. He stepped closer to one, then another. Every single blade had markings, and every marking the same name. Mara Voss. Eli's stomach tightened. That's not a coincidence, he whispered. A low sound rumbled behind him. Not loud, not aggressive, but enough. Eli's body went rigid slowly, carefully. He turned. It stood at the entrance of the chamber. Massive, larger than any of the documented predator species he'd seen in archived footage. Its silhouette filled the opening, blocking out what little light filtered in from outside. The glowing eyes locked onto him, unblinked. Judging. Eli swallowed. Okay, he said quietly, raising one hand slightly. Let's not do anything stupid here. The creature didn't move, didn't growl, didn't attack. It just watched. Eli's heart pounded against his ribs. His mind raced. Don't run. Don't reach for a weapon. Don't act like prey. He forced himself to stand still. I'm not here to fight, he said, his voice steadier than he felt, just passing through. The predator tilted its head slightly. The motion was familiar. Too familiar. Eli's eyes flicked toward the blades again, then back to the creature. You made these, he said slowly. No response. But something shifted. In the air. Nod tension. Recognition. Eli took a cautious step backward. The predator didn't follow, didn't advance. It simply watched, like it was waiting. For what? Eli whispered under his breath. His gaze dropped to the blade. On his pack. The one he found. The one with the same name. His hand moved almost on its own. Slowly, deliberately. He unclipped it and held it out in front of him. I didn't know, he said. I just found it. The predator's eyes shifted to the blade. Something changed, subtle but unmistakable. It stepped forward once, twice. Eli held his ground. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But something deeper, something quieter, told him not to. The creature stopped just a few feet away, close enough for Eli to see the details now. Scars along its armor-like skull. Faint etchings, similar to the ones on the blades. Its gaze lifted from the Eli's face. And for a moment Eli didn't see a monster. He saw memory. The predator reached out, not with claws extended, not with violence, but with something almost careful. It touched the blade lightly. Then, just as slowly, it pushed it back toward Eli. Eli blinked. You're giving it back. The creature exhaled a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the chamber. Not a threat, something else. Eli frowned, confusion mixing with something deeper. Why? The answer didn't come in words. It came in images. Not literal images, but impressions. Fragments. A battlefield under a burning sky. A human figure standing alone. Blood, smoke, fire, and behind her cubs small, afraid. Protected. Eli singled quotes. Reth-Ka. That's her, he whispered. Mara. The predator's gaze didn't waver. Eli felt something twist in his chest. You remember her? Another low rumble. Softer this time. Eli looked down at the blade in his hands. Every one of these, he said slowly, glancing at the forest of blades around him. They're not weapons. They were never meant to be. They're full her. The realization hit harder than any physical blow. Humans had come here as conquerors. As hunters. As something to be feared. And yet, the creatures they tried to wipe out chose to remember one of them. Not for destruction, for sacrifice. Eli let out a shaky breath. We got it wrong, he said quietly. Didn't we? The predator didn't respond. It didn't need to. Eli looked around the chamber again, seeing it differently now. Not a graveyard. A memorial. Not trophies. Stories. Every blade. A memory of a moment where one human chose not to be the monster they expected. Eli swallowed hard. We were the problem. He admitted. The words felt heavy, honest, necessary. The predator stepped back slightly, giving him space, not driving him away, allowing him to leave. Eli hesitated. Then he carefully reattached the blade to his pack. I'll tell them, he said, what really happened here. A pause. Then softer. They won't believe me. For the first time, something almost like humor flickered through his tone. The predator made a low sound again. If Eli didn't know better, he might have thought it understood. He turned slowly, walking toward the exit of the chamber. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the entrance, he stopped, looked back one final time. The predator still stood among the blades, silent, watchful, guarding something far more important than territory. Memory. Eli nodded once, not to a creature, but to what it represented. Then, he stepped out into the cold, empty valley. The silence didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't empty. It was respectful. And as Eli walked away, one thought echoed in his mind louder than anything else. They didn't spare us because they were weak. They spared us because someone taught them how to be better than we ever were. They remember her, even though they never learned her language. The wind howled across the broken plains of VX-331, dragging dust in long, whispering trails that curled around jagged rocks like ghosts that refused to leave. It carried scents, blood, metal, and something older. Something that lingered long after the war ended. High above the valley, perched on a ridge that overlooked everything, a massive figure stood, UNMOVING.RETH-KA. Once, he had been small enough to hide behind a human's legs. Now, he was the thing others feared in the dark. His body was larger than any of his kind before, him also layered over bone-plated armor, scars etched across his hide, like marks of survival. But the most striking thing wasn't his size, it was what he carried, strapped along his side. Secured with woven sinew and carved bindings, was a blade, not metal, bone, smooth, balanced, deliberately shaped, and along its length markings, a name. He didn't understand it, not in the way humans did, but he knew what it meant. The wind shifted Reth-Ka's head, lifted slightly. Something new had entered his territory. Something small, something wrong. Far below, near the edge of a shattered transport vessel. Movement flickered. Human. Alone. Reth-Ka didn't move immediately. He watched, always watched first. That was something she had taught him, though not with words, with presence, with action. With the way she stood between danger and something weaker, without hesitation. The memory wasn't clear. It never was. Just fragments, impressions burned into instinct. A shape, a voice, warmth, and then pain. Loss. Reth. Hawk exhaled slowly, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Below, the human stumbled. Small. Injured. A child. The crash must have happened recently. The transport still smoked faintly, its hull torn open like a wound. Debris scattered across the ground, some still glowing from impact heat. The Trifima Yun dragged herself a few steps away from the wreckage before collapsing against a rock. Her breathing was uneven. One arm hung at an unnatural angle. Alone. Reth-Ka's gaze sharpened. Movement in the distance. Other predators not as kind. Rogue Lian, faster, driven by hunger, not memory. They had caught the scent too. Reth-Ka didn't hesitate. He moved down the ridge, across the broken terrain, each step silent despite his size. Dust kicked up behind him in faint trails, his body cutting through the landscape like a shadow given form. The child didn't see him at first. She was too busy trying not to cry. Her lips trembled as she pressed her good hand against her side, her breaths coming in short, panicked bursts. Don't move," she whispered to herself. "Just stay quiet." A sound answered her, low, close to her head, snapped up, eyes wide. And there he was, towering over her. For a moment the world stopped. The stories came rushing back, the ones humans told about this planet, about what lived here, about how nothing survived long once it was found. Her voice broke instantly. Please. She didn't even know what she was asking for. Mercy. Time. A miracle. Reth-Ka stared down at her. Small. Fragile. Afraid. The same. The exact same. Something shifted. Inside him. Not thought, not decision. Something deeper. Memory. He stepped closer. The girl flinched, trying to pull herself back, but her body refused to cooperate. Pain locked her in place. "Please don't," she whispered, tears spilling now. "I don't want to die." Reth-Ka lowered his head slightly. Not aggressive. Not hunting. Observing. Her scent carried fear, pain, and something else. Familiar behind him, the rogue predators closed in. Their shapes appeared over the ridge, three of them. Lean and hungry. Their movements quick and erratic. They didn't hesitate when they saw the situation. Easy prey. They lunged forward. Reth-Ka turned, and in that instant, everything changed. He stepped between them and the child. The rogues slowed, confused. This wasn't expected. This wasn't normal. Reth-Ka's body lowered slightly, muscles tightening, a deep growl building in his chest. Not wild, not uncontrolled. Measured. A warning. The rogues didn't listen. Hunger overruled instinct. They charged. The first one leaped, aiming for the child behind him. Never reached her. Reth-Ka moved faster than something his size should have been able to. He intercepted mid-air, slamming the rogue into the ground with crushing force. Bone cracked. The creature didn't get up. The second came from the side. Reth-Ka twisted, taking the hit along his armored shoulder, before retaliating with a strike. That sent the attacker skidding across the rocks. The third hesitated just for a second, long enough to realize this wasn't a hunt. This was something else. It backed away slowly, then turned and fled. The second followed. Silence returned, broken only by the girl's shaky breathing. Reth-Ka stood there for a moment longer, making sure they were gone. Then, he turned back. The child hadn't moved. She stared at him like she couldn't decide what he was anymore, monster or something else. You didn't, she stammered. Reth-Ka stepped closer again, slower this time. He lowered himself slightly, bringing his massive frame closer to her level. The blade at his side caught the light. Her eyes shifted to it, frowned. Double quotes. What is that? He didn't answer. Could. And single quotes T. But something in him pushed forward. A memory, a shape, a feeling. He reached down carefully, gripping the edge of her torn clothing with the gentlest pressure his claws could manage. She descended and froze, as he pulled. Not to harm. To move. To guide. He began dragging her away from the wreckage, away from danger. At first, she resisted. Then she realized he wasn't taking her to die. He was taking her somewhere safe. You're helping me, she whispered, disbelief cracking through her voice. Reth-Ka didn't look back, but the low rumble in his chest returned. Softer. Familiar. Hours passed in fragments of movement and rest. He carried her part of the way when her strength gave out, lifting her carefully across his back. She clung weakly to the fur along his neck, too exhausted to question it anymore. By the time they reached the den, the sky had darkened completely. The other predators were there watching. Silent. They saw the human, saw the blade, and they understood. No challenge came, no threat, only acknowledgement. Reth-Ka lowered the girl gently onto the ground near the entrance. She winced, but didn't cry out. This time, stronger than before, she looked up at him. Why? She asked again, her voice barely audible. Reth-Ka stood over her, still protective. He didn't have words, but he had something better, memory. And in that quiet moment, as the wind whispered through the rocks and the stars burned cold above them, he did the only thing he could. He stayed, not as a predator, not as a hunter, but as something humanity. Never expected them to become a guardian, because once a human had stood where he stood now, and chosen the same. History erased her. But the predators didn't. The dropship cut through the upper atmosphere of VX-331 like a blade through Scottish fast. Precise, indifferent to what had come before. Its engines burned to clean blue, a stark contrast to the rust-colored storms that still lingered below. Inside, Captain Ilias stood with his arms crossed, watching the planet grow larger through the reinforced viewport. Looks dead, one of the soldiers muttered behind him. Ilias didn't respond immediately. Dead. Planets didn't unsettle him. Quiet ones did. Stay sharp, he said finally. We're not here to admire the scenery. The mission briefing had been simple. Too simple. Re-establish a forward outpost. Survey remaining resources. Confirm extinction of hostile species. That last part had been underlined. Confirmed, which meant someone, somewhere, wasn't entirely sure. The dropship landed hard against the cracked surface, sending a ripple of dust outward. The ramp lowered, with a hiss, revealing a landscape that looked like it had been abandoned. Mid-sentence structures half buried in debris, burn marks etched into stone, scattered wreckage that had long since stopped smoking, but never quite stopped feeling warm. Ilias stepped out first, boots hitting ground. Crunch. Perimeter. He ordered. The squad fanned out, weapons raised, scanning. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing breathed, nothing lived. Or so it seemed. Hours passed as they advanced deeper into the ruins. Data logs were sparse. Whatever had happened here had either been classified or erased. Ilias crouched beside a fractured terminal, brushing dust away from its surface. Powers. Gone, one of the techs called out. No usable data. Of course not, Ilias muttered. That would make things easy. They moved on. The silence followed. At first, it felt like a victory, proof that the mission had already been completed by someone else. But the longer they walked, the more it felt like something watching them choose not to reveal itself. It was near dusk when they found the first blade. Captain A soldier called out, "You need to see this." Ilias approached, eyes narrowing. The blade was embedded in the ground at an angle, its edge catching the fading light. Bone, not metal. Polished. Maintained. Intentional. "This isn't human," the soldier said. "No," Ilias replied slowly. "It's not." He knelt, studying the markings along its surface. Symbols, repeated patterns, language. "Can you translate it?" he asked. The tech stepped forward, activating a handheld scanner. It buzzed faintly as it processed the etchings. "Give me a second." The device flickered. Paused, then displayed a result. The tech frowned. "That's strange." "What is it?" "It's a name." Ilias looked up. "What name?" The tech hesitated. "Mara Voss." Silence settled over the group. "That's human," another soldier said. "I know," Ilias replied. His gaze returned to the blade. Why would something out here be carrying a human name? No one answered, because no one had an answer. "Keep moving," Ilias said, standing. "This isn't random." They didn't have to go far to realize how wrong everything was. More blades appeared, dozens, then hundreds, all embedded in the ground, forming something that looked disturbingly like a pattern, not chaotic, not scattered. Organized. Deliberate. A field of markers stretching across the valley. "Sir," the tech whispered. "They all say the same thing." Ilias didn't need to ask. He already knew. "Mara Voss," he said quietly. The nay felt heavier now. Not just a word, a presence. The air shifted. Subtle. But enough. Ilias's instincts kicked in instantly. Weapons up. The squad snapped into formation. Too late. Shapes emerged from the RIDG linist. Large. Silent. Surrounding them without a single sound of approach. Predators. Alive. Very much alive. One of the soldiers cursed under his breath. "I thought they said these things were wiped out." "Apparently," Ilias replied, his voice calm but tight. "They were wrong. The creatures didn't charge, didn't roar, didn't behave like the mindless threats the reports had described. They just watched. Calculating. Measuring. Double quotes. "Hold fire," Ilias said. "Sir, hold fire." The tension snapped tight. Every soldier waiting for the first move. It didn't come. Instead, one of the predators stepped forward, larger than the others, scarred, and added cedar blade. Bone. Marked. The same. Ilias felt something shift in his chest. "Those aren't weapons," he said under his breath. "What?" "They're not carrying them for combat." The predator stopped a short distance away. Close enough to attack, close enough not to. Its eyes locked onto Ilias. Not wild, not feral, aware. "What the hell?" one of the soldiers whispered. The predator's gaze dropped briefly to the weapons raised around it. Then, it stepped back. "Just one step," Ilias frowned. "It's giving us space." "That doesn't make any sense," the tech said. "No," Ilias replied quietly. "It doesn't." Another predator moved along the flank, then another. Not closing in. Positioning. Guiding. Double quotes. "They're hurting us," a soldier said, panic creeping into his voice. "Not like prey," Ilias corrected. "Like," he trailed off. The word felt absurd. "Like, they don't want us here." The realization settled heavily over the group. "Sir," the tech said, his voice shaking slightly. "I managed to pull something from the old logs back at the first structure." Ilias didn't look away from the predators. "Say it. It's fragmented. But there was a human presence here before. Military operation. Classified. Go on." There was an extermination order issued. Ilias's jaw tightened. And then one officer went rogue. Silence. The kind that fills in the blanks. Before the words, "To what happened to her?" Ilias asked. The tech swallowed. "Records say she was killed in action. Cause of death friendly fire." Ilias closed his eyes briefly. "Mara Voss," he said. The predator in front of him made a low sound. Not aggressive, not warning. Something else. Recognition. Ilias opened his eyes again. "They remember her," he said. No one argued because it was obvious now. The blades, the patterns, the behavior. They're not attacking us, Ilias continued slowly, even though they could. One of the soldiers shifted nervously. Why not? Ilias looked at the blade at the creature's side. Because she didn't. The weight of that realization pressed down on all of them at once. Humanity had come here before as conquerors, as executioners, and one of their own had stood against it and died for it. The predators hadn't forgotten. Even if humans had. Ilias lowered his weapon slowly, deliberately. Double quotes, stand down, he ordered. Sir. That's an order. Reluctantly, one by one, the others followed. Weapons lowered. Tension eased. The predator watched the movement carefully. Then, after a long moment, it turned and began to walk away. The others followed. Not retreating in fear, leaving. Allowing. Granting. Ilyas exhaled slowly. They're choosing not to fight, he said. The tech nodded, still staring. They're honoring something. Someone, Ilias corrected. He looked out across the field of blades, one last time, at the name repeated over and over again. Mara Voss. We wiped this place clean, he said quietly. Or at least we tried to. And they could do the same to us now, the soldier added. Ilias shook his head. But they won't. Why? He watched the last of the predators disappear over the ridge. Because they're better than we were. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with understanding, with regret, and with something far more uncomfortable than fear. Respect. Ilyas turned back toward the dropship. Mission update, he said into his com. Hostile. Speech is not extinct. He paused, then added. And they're not the enemy. Every blade bore her name. Carved into bone, not metal. Dr. Ciro Kane had spent her entire career studying alien cultures, and she prided herself on one thing. Above all else, detachment. Observe, record, interpret, never project, never assume, never feel. That last one was the hardest, and VX-331 was making it impossible. The transport shuttle lifted off behind her with a low hum, leaving her alone at the edge of Predator territory. The research team had argued against this part of the mission. No escort, no weapons, no defensive drones. Cultural immersion, she had told them. Suicide, they had replied. Now, standing beneath a sky that looked permanently bruised. She wasn't entirely sure which one it was. All right, she muttered, adjusting the recorder attached to her collar. Field log, entry 1. Dr. Ciro Kane. Direct contact protocol initiated. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Ahead of her, the landscape shifted from barren rock to something structured. Not artificial. Intentional. The ground was marked by shallow grooves forming curved pathways, leading toward a central formation of stone pillars. Each pillar was embedded with objects that caught the dim light in irregular gliss. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Glycera approached slowly, every step deliberate. Initial observation, she whispered into the recorder. Blade-like constructs, embedded in ritual formation. Material appears to be organic, possibly bone. She reached one and crouched beside it. Up close, the craftsmanship was undeniable. Smooth edges, balanced weight. Not crude tools, refined objects. Symbolic. Her fingers hovered just above the surface. Not weapons, she said softly. Or at least, not primarily. The markings along the blade drew her attention next. Repetitive, structured. Language. Her scanner activated automatically, projecting a faint overlay as it processed the symbols. Ciro frowned. That's not possible. The translation stabilized. She read it once. Then again. Mara Voss. She leaned back slightly, the name echoing in her mind. Human repeated. On every blade that doesn't align with any recorded cultural exchange, she said, her voice tightening just slightly. There's no documentation of human integration with native species on VX-331. A low sound interrupted her. Ciro froze. Slowly, she stood. They were already there. She hadn't heard them approach. Massive forms emerged from between the stone pillars, their movements silent despite their size. Their eyes reflected the dim light, creating a ring of glowing points around her. Watching, waiting. Ciro swallowed. All right, she murmured, forcing herself not to step back. First contact. Her training kicked in, guiding her posture and unthreatening, open stance. Slow movements. I am not a threat, she said clearly, her voice carrying just enough to reach them without sounding aggressive. The predators didn't react at least. Not in any way she recognized. One of them stepped forward, larger than the rest, older scars traced across its body, layered over time like a map of survival, and at its cedar blade, identical to the others, marked Sira. Single quotes, his gaze flicked between the creature and the blade. "You carry them," she said quietly, "not just display them." The predator tilted its head slightly. The motion sent a strange chill down her spine. It wasn't random. It felt deliberate. "You understand me?" She whispered, not the words, but something deeper. Context. Intent. The predator took another step closer. Sira held her ground. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay still. Observe, record, understand. That single quotes, why she was here. The creature stopped just within arm's reach, close enough that she could see the fine details now, the texture of its fur, the faint etchings along the blade, the way its breathing remained slow and controlled. Not hunting, not threatening. Present. Sira slowly raised her hand, palm open. "I won't harm you," she said. The predator lowered its head slightly, then, carefully it moved, not toward her, toward the blade embedded in the pillar beside her. It reached out, gripping the hilt with precise control, and pulled it free. Saya's breath caught. The creature turned the blade slightly, angling it toward her, showing it not as a threat, as a statement. Saya leaned in just enough to see the markings. Clearly Mara Voss, she whispered again. Her mind raced. "Who was she?" she asked softly. The predator made a low sound, different from before, deeper, resonant. It turned its head slightly, looking toward the center of the formation. Sira followed its gaze. At the heart of the pillars stood something larger. A structure made entirely of bone, not chaotic, constructed, layered carefully into an arch-like shape that framed an open space beneath it. And within that space nothing, empty, but not forgotten. Sira stepped forward slowly, drawn by something she couldn't quite explain. The predators didn't stop her. They parted slightly, creating a path, not forced, allowed. "This is a memorial," she said under her breath. Her voice trembled now, just slightly. Not from fear, from realization. She stepped beneath the arch. The air felt different here. Heavier still, as if the space itself held meaning. Her recorder continued running, capturing every breath, every shift in tone. "Central structure. Appears ceremonial," she said. "Possibly a site of reverence." The word felt strange coming out of her mouth. She had studied dozens of species-scene rituals, hierarchies, symbolic behaviors. But this was something else. "Who was she?" Sira asked again, turning slowly. The predator stood around the perimeter, silent, watching. Waiting. The elder stepped forward once more. It stopped just outside the arch. Didn't enter. Sira noticed that immediately. "You don't come in here," she said. "A boundary. A rule. Respect." Her chest tightened. "She stood here," Sira said quietly, "the pieces falling into place, didn't she?" The predator's gaze didn't waver. That was answer enough. Sira closed her eyes for a brief moment, and then something unexpected happened. She imagined it, not as data, not as hypothesis, but as a moment of battlefield, fire in the sky, a human figure, standing between danger and something, defenseless, refusing to move, refusing to break. Her eyes opened slowly. "She died here," Sira whispered. The silence deepened. "Not empty." Acknowledging. Sira turned her gaze to the blades surrounding the structure. "Every one of these," she said softly. "They're not weapons." Her voice dropped further. "They're offerings." The words settled into the space with weight. Understanding. "These aren't tools of war," she continued. "They're memory." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "She changed you." The predator made that low, resonant sound again. Closer. This time, softer. Agreement. Sero let out a slow breath. "For a species classified as apex predators," she said quietly, almost to herself, "this level of cultural adaptation, empathy, it shouldn't be possible." But it was, standing right in front of her, living. Breathing. Remembering. Siro looked down at her hands. For the first time in a long time she wasn't detached. She felt it. The weight of what had happened here. The cost of it. "She didn't just save you," Sira said, her voice steadied again, "but something had changed. She taught you." The predator remained still, watching. Listening. Sira nodded slowly. "And you didn't forget." She stepped back from the center of the arch, careful not to turn her back completely. Respect, even if she didn't fully understand all their rules. She understood that much as she moved away. The predators closed the space behind her, not trapping, restoring, protecting. Zero reached the edge of the formation and paused, glancing back one last time. The blades caught the dim light again, each one a quiet testament to something humanity had nearly erased. Not a victory, not a conquest. A sacrifice. Her recorder was still running. For once, she didn't rush to summarize, didn't reduce it to data points or conclusions. She just spoke. Field log update, she said softly. Subject species demonstrates advanced cultural evolution centered around a singular human figure, identified as Mara Voss. She hesitated, then added, correction, not evolution. Her eyes lingered on the blades. Transformation. And as she turned to leave, one thought followed her like a shadow. She couldn't shake humanity came here to study monsters. But somehow, one human taught the monsters how to become something more they had every reason to kill. But they remembered her. The convoy never saw it coming. One moment, the transport cruisers were slicing cleanly through the upper atmosphere of VX-331. Engines steady, systems green, mission, parameters, routine. The next, the sky fractured, warning gravitational shear detected. The pilot shouted. The cockpit lit up with red alerts. Instruments flickered wildly as an unseen force twisted the airspace around them like a clenched fist. What the hell is that? Someone yelled from the back. No idea. Using stabilizers. The lead cruiser jerked violently, its nose dipping before slamming sideways into a violent current of pressure. The hull groaned. Metal screamed. Brace! The world flipped. Impact came like a hammer. The transport hit the ground hard, skidding across jagged terrain, tearing through a rock before finally grinding to a halt in a storm of dust and debris. Silence. Followed. Not peaceful. Stunned. Double quotes. Status. A voice coughed through the smoke. Alive, someone replied weakly. Barely. Another added. The rear hatch hung twisted open, letting in the cold, rust-scented wind of the planet. Smoke curled upward in thin, choking spirals. Lena pushed herself up from the floor, her ears ringing. Is everyone okay? She asked, her voice shaken despite her effort to steady it. No one answered immediately, because no one knew. She stumbled forward, stepping over debris, gripping the wall for balance as she made her way outside. The world beyond the wreckage was vast, empty, and wrong. The sky hung low and heavy, painted in dull reds and grays. The ground stretched endlessly, broken by jagged formations that looked like the remains of something ancient. Something that had once stood tall and was now reduced to fragments. Lena swallowed. I don't like this place, she whispered. You're not supposed to, a man behind her replied, stepping out of the wreckage. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot, but his eyes were sharp. Stay close. We don't know what's out here. As if summoned by the words, a sound echoed across the plain. Low, distant, but unmistakable. Something alive. The group froze. What was that? Someone asked. No one answered. They didn't need to. They all knew. Inside, the man said quickly, move. Too late. Shapes appeared on the horizon. Fast. Closing in. Predators sleek, lean and moving with terrifying speed, their bodies low to the ground as they advanced. Their eyes locked onto the survivors, with a focus that made Lena's chest tighten. They found us, someone whispered. Weapons were raised, shaking hands. Unsteady aim. Hold your ground, the man barked. Lena's heart pounded in her ears. This was it. This was how it ended. Stranded on a dead world. Torn apart by things that didn't even understand what they were killing. The predators slowed as they got closer, circling, testing, waiting for the moment to strike. One of them stepped forward, its body tense, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Lena couldn't breathe. Don't move, the man whispered. The creature crouched lower. Then a new sound cut through the air, deeper, heavier. The ground trembled slightly with each step that followed. The smaller predators froze. Their attention shifted instantly. Something else was coming, something bigger. From the ridge above, a massive form emerged. Towering, dominant, unmistakable. Reth-Ka. He moved slowly down the slope. His presence alone enough to change the entire atmosphere of the scene. The smaller predators backed away instinctively, their earlier confidence dissolving into caution. Lena stared. Is that worse? She whispered. No one answered, because they didn't know. Reth-Ka stopped between the two groups, between predator and prey. His gaze swept over the smaller creatures first. A low, resonant growl rolled from his chest, not chaotic, not wild a command. The rogues hesitated. One of them snarled in response, baring its teeth. Reth-Ka didn't react. He simply took one step forward. That was enough. The tension snapped. The rogues backed off, slowly at first, then faster, until they turned and disappeared into the distance. Silence. Return. Heavy. Uncertain. Renner's group didn't lower their weapons. Not yet, because, now, the bigger threat remained. Reth-Ka turned. His eyes settled on the humans. One by one, assessing, measuring, remembering. The man beside Lena raised his weapon slightly higher. Don't, Lena whispered. He glanced at her. Are you crazy? That thing, it saved us. He hesitated. Reth-Ka stepped closer. Slow, deliberate. Every movement controlled. Lena felt her fear shift, not disappear, but change. This wasn't the same as before. The way he moved, the way he looked at them. It didn't feel like hunger, it felt like consideration. Reth-Ka stopped a few meters away, close enough to attack, close enough not to. The wind tugged at Lena's hair as she took a small step forward. Lena, don't, the man hissed. But she did anyway. Her legs trembled, but she forced them to move. One step, then another, until she stood slightly ahead of the others. Reth-Ka's gaze followed her, locked onto her. She swallowed hard. You're not going to hurt us, she said. Her voice barely steady. It wasn't a question, it was a hope. Reth-Ka tilted his head slightly. The motion stirred something in her memory, something she couldn't quite place. Then she saw it. The blade, strapped along his side. Bone. Mark. Double quotes. What is that? She whispered. Reth-Ka didn't answer, but something shifted her. A sound rumbled in his chest. Not threatening. Familiar. He turned slightly, glancing back toward the horizon, then back at them, and slowly he stepped to the side, creating a gap. A path. Lena blinked. What? The man behind her frowned. Is it letting us go? Reth-Ka took a few steps forward along the open path, then stopped, looked back, waiting. Let us. Reth-Ka. He wants us to follow him. That's insane, the man said. That's how predators lure prey. Does it look like it needs to lure us? Lena shot back. He didn't have an answer for that. Reth-Ka waited. Patient. Unmoving. Like he had all the time in the world. Lena made her choice. I'm going, she said. Lena, if we stay here, the others will come back. That much was obvious. Reluctantly, the group followed. Reth-Ka led them across the broken terrain. His pace steady, never too fast. He adjusted when they slowed, stopping when they struggled, always keeping just enough distance to guide without forcing. Hours passed. The sky darkened. The cold set in. And still, he led, not hunting, not chasing, guiding. Eventually the landscape changed. The jagged rocks gave way to a more sheltered area, where natural formations created barriers against the wind. Signs of life appeared. Tracks, markings, subtle indications of territory. Safe. Or at least, safer. Reth-Ka stopped, turned. Humans gathered behind him, exhausted, confused, alive. Lena stepped forward again. Why? She asked softly. The same question, the same weight. Reth-Ka looked at her. Really looked. And for a brief moment, something passed between them. Not words, not understanding, but recognition. He shifted slightly, the blade at his side catching the faint light. Lena's eyes followed it. She frowned. That name, she murmured, though she couldn't read it. Reth-Ka exhaled slowly. A low, steady sound. Then he turned away, stepping back into the shadows, leaving them there alive, safe. The group stood in silence. No one moved. No one spoke, because none of them could fully process what had just happened. Finally, the man beside Lena lowered his weapon. They had every reason to kill us, he said quietly. Lena nodded, her eyes still fixed on the place where Reth-Ka had disappeared. But they didn't. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold suddenly more noticeable now that the danger had passed. Why? He asked again. Lena didn't answer right away. Her mind lingered on the blade, on the way the creature had looked at him. Not like prey, not like enemies. Something else. She took a slow breath, because someone taught them not to. And somewhere, far beyond their sight, a predator walked beneath a darkening sky, carrying a blade that wasn't meant to kill, but to remember it shouldn't have been possible. But it said her name. Dr. Jonah Krell didn't believe in miracles. He believed in patterns. In neural pathways, in stimulus and response, in the predictable ways intelligence evolved when given enough time and pressure. And yet, nothing in his research prepared him for this. The observation chamber was quiet, save for the low hum of containment fields and the soft flicker of monitoring screens. Behind the reinforced barrier, the massive predator sat motionless, its eyes half-lidded but aware of everything. Jonah studied him closely, pacing slowly as he reviewed the latest data on his tablet. Cognitive recognition levels exceed projected models. He muttered, memory retention, behavioral adaptation. This isn't just instinct. Across the glass, Reth-Ka's gaze shifted slightly, following him. Tracking, not like a predator, like something thinking. Jonah stopped. You understand more than you're supposed to, he said quietly. Reth-Ka blinked once. Slow, deliberate. Jonah exhaled, running a hand through his hair. All right, he said. Let's try something new. He tapped a control, activating the audio system. A soft tone filled the chamber. Then a voice. Human. Recorded Ra. The syllables were spaced. Clear. Repeated Mara. Jonah watched carefully. Subject has shown response to symbolic triggers. He noted into the recorder, attempting phonetic association. Reth-Ka didn't react at first. He remained still, silent. Jonah frowned. Come on, he whispered. You've seen it. The blades. The markings. You know this sound. He played it again. Mara. A pause. Then again, Mara. Something shifted, subtle but real. Reth-Ka's head lifted slightly. His eyes sharpened. Jonah froze. Yeah, he said softly. You hear it? The predator stood slowly, massive form unfolding with controlled precision. He stepped closer to the barrier, each movement deliberate. Jonah didn't move, didn't breathe. Easy, he murmured. Take your time. The audio played again. Mara. Reth-Ka stopped just in front of the glass. His reflection stared back at him. And for a moment, there was something else there. Not confusion, not curiosity. Memory. His chest rose. Slowly, a low sound formed deep within him. Jonah leaned forward slightly. Go on, he whispered. The sound came again. Different this time. More focused. More, intentional. Reth-Ka's jaws shifted slightly, as if testing something unfamiliar. His throat tightened, muscles adjusting in ways they weren't designed to. And then it happened. Mara. The sound was rough, broken, barely formed, but it was there. A word. Jonah's breath hitched. No way, he whispered. Reth-Ka blinked. Then, again clearer this time. Mara. Silence filled the chamber. Heavy. Unbelievable. Jonah stumbled back a step, staring at him. You said it. Not mimicry. Not repetition. Understanding. Emotion. Reth-Ka's gaze didn't leave him, but his posture shifted slightly. Not proud, not aggressive. Something else. Jonah felt his throat tighten. Do you remember her? He asked softly. Reth-Ka didn't answer, not with words, but his head lowered slightly, and the low rumble returned. Deep, resonant grief. Greith. Jonah swallowed hard. All this time, he said quietly, we thought it was instinct, behavior patterns, evolutionary adaptation. He shook his head slowly. It wasn't, was it? Reth-Ka remained still, watching Jonah let out a shaky breath. It was her. The realization hit differently now. He stepped closer to the glass again, his voice softer. She didn't just save you. His gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. She stayed with you. Reth-Ka's eyes didn't change, but something in the silence did. Jonah placed a hand against the barrier. Most of us forget, he said. We lose people, and eventually, the memory fades. He swallowed. But you didn't. Reth-Ka shifted slightly, the blade at his side catching the light. Jonah noticed it immediately. The markings. The same name. Over and over. Mara. He repeated quietly. This time it didn't feel like a test. It felt like a name that mattered. Reth-Ka's voice came again. Softer, but certain. Mara. Jonah closed his eyes briefly, emotion catching up with him. It shouldn't be possible, he whispered. But it was. Standing right in front of him. Living proof that something deeper than language, deeper than biology, could survive time. Memory, connection, meaning. Jonah opened his eyes again, looking at the creature not as a subject, but as something more. You didn't learn to speak, he said quietly. You learned to remember. The blade was never meant to stay with them. The wind moved softly through the valley, no longer carrying the scent of war, but something quieter, something almost peaceful. Lena stood at the edge of the old memorial grounds, her eyes fixed on the figure approaching from the shadows. Reth-Ka moved slowly, deliberately, the same way he always had, like every step carried meaning. The blade at his side caught the fading light. Its surface worn smooth with time, but the markings still clear. She didn't need to read them. She already knew the name. He stopped in front of her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, carefully, he reached down and removed the blade. Lena's breath caught Tiss's. Hers. She whispered, "Reth-Ko," held it out, not as a weapon, as something else. A choice, a responsibility. Lena hesitated, then slowly took it. The weight settled into her hands, heavier than it should have been. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Reth-Ka stepped back, watching, trusting. And for the first time, Lena understood. The legacy wasn't theirs to carry anymore, it was hers. It was humanity's. And this time, they had to be worthy of it.